Hi, this is eBodyNX from the Candid Frame, and welcome to another video. Well, as I said before, I usually just look for the images that have been uploaded to the Flickr pool, and I just wait for inspiration in terms of the topic that I want to talk about for each week. And it was what I wasn't seeing in the images that really kind of spurred the idea for this week, which is shooting at night. So many of the cameras today, one of the things that they're really promoted and marketed about a lot is their ability to shoot under low light. But it was surprising to me to see that how many images that have been uploaded to the Flickr pool and elsewhere that really don't take advantage of this. Most of the stuff is shot during the day when there's an abundance of light, or in the morning when the sun is rising or the sun is setting. But after the sun is set, a lot of people aren't making photographs in the evening, and I'm not sure exactly why that is, because with today's cameras, we have an amazing advantage with the high ISO performance of DSLRs and mirrorless cameras to really deliver some incredibly looking photographs as a result. So I started looking through the pool and just wanted to see about, well, for those few people who are doing stuff at night, what are they doing, and are they making interesting images? And I think you'll find from the selection today that we are seeing some really, really good stuff. So let's start off with this portrait called Street Portraits Veteran Singleton. It was shot with an EOS 1DX with a 50mm at f1.4 at a resolution of ISO of 3200. I really like this shot. There's something about shooting in the evening which can be rather unpredictable. The light source isn't coming from the sun. It's really coming from all these sort of artificial light sources that exist within the city or the streets or wherever you are. And the look of a scene, of a place, of the people that you photograph can end up being remarkably different. Obviously, we're all shooting with color, and so because of the high contrast that this tends to lend, people tend to favor black and white conversions, and you'll see that a lot of the images here do work well as black and white. As a result of increasing the ISO to 3200 or higher, there's a little more noise that gets introduced to the image. And a lot of people like to convert it over to black and white and to interpret that same noise as grain. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to convert it over to black and white, but you'll often find that a lot of images really convert well to black and white. And I think this image here is certainly here. I mean, you get this sort of dark vignetting that's probably occurring somewhat naturally, maybe if exaggerated a little more in Photoshop, but it really works. And just having this figure standing in the rain with his flag just really makes this shot. It really is the focal point of our attention, but you can see how the light along the streets from this what seems to be a movie marquee really makes for just an interesting and beautiful photograph. Yes, there are obviously some lighting and maybe some exposure challenges with here, but this is an image that would look completely different if it was shot during the day. Imagine this shot made at noon. It still would have all these basic elements here, but there's something about the fact that the light is so isolated to just certain areas of the frame that really make it interesting. I love the gesture of this man in the middle of the rain holding this flag. I don't know for how long he was there, but it was obviously coming down. And the technical choices that he made here, the photographer made here, for making this shot is really, really good. Using that fast shutter speed, it really allowed the small droplets of water hitting the ground to really sort of stand out. It would have been a lot more difficult to do had he been using a lower ISO and thus a slower shutter speed. But also, if he's hand holding this thing, would have made it much more difficult to get a tack sharp image. And that's one of the biggest issues you have to deal with when you're shooting under low light, is that slow shutter speed. If you don't have the benefit of a tripod, you have to increase the ISO in order to make that happen. Here's an image made by Robert Larson, and this looks like it was shot on film in a bar indoors with this guy standing up against the wall having a drink. I really like the shot. It's not tack sharp, but I like the feel and the mood of it, and the natural grain that seems to be coming from whatever camera. He has what says here Epson Perfecti. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but whatever it is, I think it's a real cool moment. It really gets the feel of what it's like to be out in a bar in the middle of the evening. Bars are not typically well lit. They're not really suited for photographs most of the time, but you can find some really interesting moments, and this is sort of feeling of sort of isolation and moodiness that really gets conveyed in this photograph. And I like the fact that he's including this sort of bright area in the background, because you can see a figure in the distance and the person at the edge of the frame. But I think that it really sort of complements. If this had been all black, it would have been a little too one note. But here we get little hints of a sense of place here, and I really kind of like the shot. Technically, it may not be everything you strive for in a photograph in terms of a perfect exposure, sharpness, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes a shot doesn't need to be all that in order to be effective, and I think this shot certainly does that. Here's a picture by Jimmy Vai. It looks like he's shooting through a window on a rainy night, and he's getting these lights in the distant background, which are out of focus, so he ends up taking advantage of the bokeh provided by the lens of his, a Sony ILCE-7, which is with a 35mm f2.8. He increased his ISO to 800 here, so he could shoot at a 60th of a second and an aperture of 2.8. So he's focusing on the glass itself. So that's the point of focus. When you see this image on your own computer, you'll see like the droplets of water that are on the glass are really tacked sharp. The area in the background is completely out of focus. And this is really kind of a nice, cool, abstract image that emphasizes the light and the water. There's no person in there. There's no, obvious element in the scene that provides us a real sense of place of exactly where this is. This is more about the rain, the light, and the interplay between the two against this glass. Again, it's a shot that just would not happen during the day. During the day, you get a completely different shot. All this stuff that's black here would probably be defined by the light, and you wouldn't be getting all these round highlights in the distant background that make the shot. It's incredibly simple and clean, and I've seen shots done through window and through glass when it's raining, and it's usually in color, but I really responded really a lot to this simple and clean photograph. Here's a shot made by Tutam in Venice, and I photographed in Venice a couple of years ago, and I was there during the day, and so I didn't have a chance to make a lot of shots at night, but this shot really kind of reveals that you can portray a city, a town in a completely different way just by shooting at a different time of night, just where the artificial lights that exist within the street are creating really strong shadow. This is something along the lines that you might get during the day when you're getting very strong directional light, but it has a very different mood and feel to it than I think you would have there. Like he says here, he's emphasizing the idea of texture, because he really has a propensity for photographing texture. And I think that putting the camera away at night just because there isn't enough light is a poor reason to stop and making photographs. These cameras perform admirably. He's shooting here at 25,600 ISO, shooting at a 15th of a second at f2.8 with a 5D Mark III. And from just a casual observance of the image, I'm not bothered by whatever presence of noise are in there. He may have reduced it a bit in Lightroom or Photoshop, but the image as I see it here looks really, really good. Here's the first color image by, let's see if I can say the Ingate Tadros. Love this shot. This is of a series of doing her country images. This is My Country is a comprehensive visual documentation of Australia's indigenous people. And this is just amazing color. This is a kind of color you're not going to get during the day because there's obviously some artificial light sources in this scene. I'm not exactly sure what kind of light she's shooting under, but thankfully she's able to correct it fairly well, where the skin tones look pretty accurate. It's not exactly what they would be under daylight conditions, because it's really hard to correct for artificial light sources sometime, which is one of the big reasons why shooting with RAW is such an advantage over shooting with JPEGs when you're shooting under mixed or artificial light sources. She was using a Sony DSC RX1, shot it at ISO 2000 to get a shutter speed of a 60th of a second at f2.2. And using that wide aperture obviously gives her this great shallow depth of field. She nails the focus on the subject. But again, it's that having that reasonable shutter speed of 1/60th of a second. What a lot of people are really hesitant to increase their ISO because they're preoccupied with noise. But God, these cameras are so much better than they were 4 or 5 years ago that you don't need to hesitate to increase the ISO. If you need it, in order to get that shutter speed that is going to allow your pictures to be tack sharp, then boost it up as high as you need to go. Don't be scared about it to the point that you're not willing to pull out the camera and make the shot. Had she passed up on that opportunity here, we would not have the benefit of looking at this great photograph. And I love the body language of these two young boys looking into the camera. And I like the fact that she's including these people in the back to give us a sense of place. It looks like it was conducted at a rodeo. And how many people would not have shot this, or worse yet, have used flash in order to illuminate these kids? You could probably use a little bit of fill flash in here, but by the notes here, she didn't do that. She just depended on the ambient light within the space to be able to take care of that. Here's an image by Harvey Fish that was done at a sort of a bar or an eatery. And don't have any information here on the camera, but it's obvious that you had to use a fairly high ISO here. And this is what I was talking about, the unpredictability of the artificial light. I'm not sure whether those are fluorescence or halogen or the sort of light source, but you can see sort of the color scheme that you get as a result in this eating space where all the tables are. But then when you take a look in here, you can see there's obviously a different light source here. This seems to be what the light source is better corrected for in terms of the white balance of the camera, but I still like the fact that the rest of the scene is warm. I like the contrast between the two. And one of the things when I do choose to shoot at night, I like not knowing exactly what the color is going to be. I'll still use the raw to correct it a little bit, but sometimes I find myself defaulting to what the camera gave me initially out of the camera. There's something about the look and the feel of the light at night that's really kind of interesting. And I really like this figure in the foreground. I think without him, the shot would lack a little sense of depth. And I just love the gesture of him with his fingers on the table as if he's waiting on something. It's a good moment. Here's a shot called Night in Driveway by Chain Bizarre. No information on the camera. It looks like it. Oh, there it is. It's a Rolly 3.5 F, Rolleiflex. So this is another film image. And what seems to be like moonlight and these trees up above him, and it just looks like a very cool shot. It seems like the clouds are moving fairly fast across the moonscape, and it creates a sense of blur. The trees are sharp, because at first I thought that the camera, or he was in a car that was moving, but the leaves tell you that he was pretty static. He was pretty still when he made the shot. It was mostly a slow shutter speed that allowed that cloud movement to pass over the moon and create this sort of really moody, sort of creepy feel to the shot. It works amazingly well. So sometimes you don't necessarily have to have a very fast shutter speed in order to make a good night shot. Sometimes you can have a slower shutter speed, but just make sure that the camera is stable enough on a tripod or some sort of platform in order to make it nice and sharp. And lastly, we have this image made by Terrell Woods. He shot it with a Canon EOS 7D. It's on a film set. It says a wardrobe truck during night filming. And surprisingly, he only used ISO 100 at f8, shooting at an eighth of a second. The image looks surprisingly sharp, considering that it was shot with a camera and a lens that I do not think have vibration reduction. He was either being very steady-handed or was being able to rest the camera on some sort of platform in order to make it relatively sharp. The light provided by this light source provides a key illumination for this area here with the trailers and the car, but then you also have the light source inside of the truck itself, which is illuminating all the things in the wardrobe. I like the feel. I like the presence of the large areas of shadow, because it creates this high contrast shot which brings attention to those bright areas of the frame. If you watched some other videos in this series, you'll see a lot of times where I talk about that the brightest element in the frame is often one of the things that draws us. I talked a little about color saturation last week, but it's always important to think about, okay, what's the brightest thing in the scene and what's going to draw our eye? Obviously, it's the light source here. That's a big magnet, but as we start wandering across the frame, we start exploring this area inside of the truck. You have these three posts over here. You have the reflection off the car, off the trailer. You have another light source back here. And it ends up working really nice. Trying to make compositions that are built around this can be kind of difficult because you have to train your eye into a different way of seeing, where you're focusing more on the light and how the light interplays with the various elements in the scene. But it can make for some really interesting and very, very different photographs. So thanks for all of you who have been regularly contributing to the Flickr poll. It's I can't tell you enough how fun it is and how inspiring it is to take a look at the shots. If you haven't already, please continue to do so, and please subscribe to this channel. And if you like what you're seeing, and spread the word. And if you haven't heard or listened to any episodes of The Candid Frame, that's the podcast that's inspiring this video. It's a show I've been doing for 8 years, in which I interview photographers from all genres of photography. So if you have a passion for photography, just visit thecandidframe.com and you'll get an earful of inspiration every week. So thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you next time.